Post your city and the exact time where you are right now. Seriously, it's always fun to see where folks are tuning in from. Then imagine building your dream home, not just with bricks and glass, but with an entire philosophy baked into the wiring. Alex Hayes does that. 15 years of work in the dance of electrons. The guy who can make power grids hum like a symphony orchestra. Oak Haven Springs looked like a unicorn, solar-ready, its own microgrid, battery storage tucked away like treasure in every home's foundation. He even helped write the software that made the whole thing run, a few lines of his code pulsing under every light switch in the community. But paradise has a way of attracting snakes. Or in this case, Brenda and Carol Miller, co-presidents of the HOA and self-appointed guardians of beige uniformity, the sort of people who'd think a cloud was a violation of the community color scheme. Alex's solar panels were sleek, black on black, hugging the roofline like they belonged there. He dotted every I in the HOA submission process, even produced renderings you could have mistaken for architectural magazine spreads. Denied. Vague rule about rooftop protuberances, as if his panels were some medieval siege weapons instead of clean energy marvels. He installed them anyway, thinking it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission, especially when the permission was never coming. 2 weeks of bliss, and then, one Tuesday morning, glass glittering on his lawn like someone had spilled a galaxy. Impact points that screamed ball-peen hammer. Historians still argue whether petty power or sheer spite fuels the worst HOA decisions. But either way, Alex's heart dropped, then hardened into cold steel. He documented everything. Hundreds of photos, narrated video, repair estimate north of $25,000. He emailed, called, followed up. Silence. Eventually cornered them at the clubhouse. Iced tea in hand, smirks in place, and got the kind of denial you only hear from people who know exactly what they did. Brenda laughed. Carol blamed a breeze. Then came the final insult, an HOA violation notice for his broken panels, $100 a day if he didn't remove them. That's when engineer Alex stepped aside and strategist Alex took over. He boxed his fury, put on his investigator's hat, and started pulling threads, security footage of 2 hooded figures, one tall, one stocky, suspiciously like the Miller sisters' favorite handyman duo. Not court-proof yet, but enough to aim him toward the one system they couldn't see coming, their dependency on the grid he controlled. He sat at his desk that night with 2 windows open. On the left, HOA charters, bylaws, years of meeting minutes. On the right, the full schematic of the Oak Haven microgrid. Every line of code he'd once written with pride. Cross-referencing was like reading the DNA of a beast he'd helped create. And there it was, buried in Section 8, Article 4, a sentence he had slipped in years ago. The grid operator, him, could manage power distribution at the individual address level for diagnostic testing and load balancing. A scalpel in the right hands, a guillotine in the wrong. The Millers' ostentatious McMansion? One deed, one circuit, one point of failure. Historians still argue whether irony counts as karma, but Alex saw no distinction that night. Cutting their power outright would be too obvious, like throwing a pie in their face at a dinner party. No, this needed the finesse of a magician and the paperwork of a government audit. He wrote var.py to any outsider, a routine voltage and amplitude regulation diagnostic. To him, Operation Flicker. It would drop voltage from a steady 120 to a wheezing 90 volts at random intervals, not low enough to trigger surge protection, but just enough to make smart devices reboot, compressors overheat, lights glow like they'd caught the flu. A fridge that forgets it's cold, a router that develops stage fright, a garage door with commitment issues. This was his chosen theater. He tested it in simulation, added random number generators so the disruptions never formed a pattern, then wrote airtight log entries with technical justifications. Grid stability test 4A, diagnostic 7C. If anyone ever asked, it would look like he was saving the neighborhood from disaster, not orchestrating one at a single address. When the first sag hit, 1449, exactly 91 volts for 90 seconds, he could imagine the sisters' routines crumbling in silence. Brenda's daytime talk show coughing into blackness, Carol's iMac vanishing mid-sentence, the hum of central air snapping off like a scolded child. 5 minutes later, another sag, shorter this time. The beauty was the mystery. They'd blame the utility, the appliances, the universe before they'd think of him. Within an hour, Brenda's email arrived in the HOA inbox. Power is flickering. Fix immediately. He let it sit, replied politely to her and the entire board, framing it as routine system-wide diagnostics for the good of all residents. By day 2, he'd tuned the schedule for maximum psychological turbulence. Short, sharp sags in the mornings to ruin coffee and garage doors. Long evening dips to sabotage cooking and TV. Electricians came and went from 124 Willow Lane, baffled, leaving the sisters red-faced on their driveway. And every smug glance they'd once aimed at him was now replaced by furtive, exhausted scanning of their own powerless kingdom. By Friday, the Miller sisters had worked themselves into a froth, firing off all-caps emails and finally calling an emergency HOA meeting, mandatory attendance, to address the catastrophic failure of the community power grid. They thought they were summoning a firing squad. In truth, they were sending invitations to their own public unseating. The clubhouse filled with anxious residents, whispers about flickering lights bouncing off the walls. Brenda and Carol took the podium, righteous fury in their eyes, hair slightly less coiffed than usual, voices pitching their woes as if they'd been roughing it in the wilderness rather than in a McMansion with a hiccuping fridge. They painted themselves as martyrs of a failing grid, conspicuously leaving out that theirs was the only house affected. Carol's finger found him in the crowd, accusation hanging like smoke. The grid operator, Alex Hayes, was responsible. And wasn't it funny this all started after his ugly, unapproved solar panels got him disciplined? He walked calmly to the front, laptop in hand, and without a word, projected the microgrid interface. Every house glowed steady green, except one. 124, Willow Lane pulsed an angry red. He read aloud from the Community Charter, Section 8, Article 4, explaining these failures were targeted diagnostics, critical for system health, and that the chosen address had been 124 Willow Lane. Murmurs shifted toward suspicion, and then he unveiled the evidence folder. High-res photos of his smashed panels, security footage of 2 hooded figures matching the Miller's handyman crew, a social media brag about a late-night demo job, and the perfect match of a dented work truck. Gasps cracked the air like static. A quiet lawyer in the back stood and called for 2 things, a police report and a vote of no confidence. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in unity. The tally was 58-2. Brenda and Carol were ousted before they could catch their breath. Police took a thumb drive of Alex's evidence, and the handyman folded in minutes, confessing to $3,000 cash from the sisters to make those ugly things disappear. Criminal charges followed, legal fees mounted, insurance refused to help. Forced to pay for Alex's new, even better solar array plus damages, they sold the McMansion and left Oak Haven Springs under the watch of moving trucks, their empire reduced to a cautionary footnote. The new HOA board, far more reasonable, asked Alex to help rewrite guidelines. Clear, fair, pro-sustainability. The community blossomed into the green model it was meant to be, and Alex's panels gleamed in the sun, their cost covered by the very people who had destroyed them. Some evenings, he'd check the app and see his home sending clean energy back into the grid, a quiet reminder that the best victories are the ones that don't need gloating, just a little knowing smile. And in the soft fade of that thought, the pace slows, the edges of the day curling inward. The image of those sleek black panels under a late summer sunset lingers, the hum of a stable grid rolling steady through the neighborhood like a lullaby. Justice, when served with precision and patience, leaves no scorch marks, only a balanced quiet, the kind that lets you breathe a little deeper. Somewhere, 2 former tyrants now live without their podium, their gavel, or their illusion of control, and in their absence, Oak Haven Springs hums on, lit not just by wires and silicon, but by the simple relief of fairness restored. Sleep comes easier when the lights stay on, and maybe that's the sweetest victory of all.